The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, after doubling the debt with inflationary spending, doubling the cost of housing with more bureaucracy that blocks building, doubling the number of people using food banks with carbon taxes on farmers and truckers who bring us our food. Finally, they're planning a fall update, but they'll do it in the snow on December 16th. Our message is stop.
Yes.
Stop the inflationary spending. Stop the tax increases on food and homes. Stop indebting Canadians. Will they please just stop?
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, on the 16th of December, we will present our economic record in this chamber, and we will talk about the fall economic statement. And I anticipate that you're going to hear a lot about the economic record that we've amassed. One thing that I anticipate you'll hear about is what we've done with respect to childcare. On childcare, an economic affordability model, we've brought it down to $10 a day in 8 provinces. That has resulted in 110,000 women joining the workplace. What is that record, Mr. Speaker? 85% of women are now participating in the workforce in Canada. That is a record high. That is what we stand behind on this side of the House.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, what they've amassed is a lot of debt. In fact, they doubled the debt. This Prime Minister has added more debt than all prior Prime Ministers combined, which has caused the worst inflation in 40 years, inflation that is now rising as the debt is rising. Now, the Finance Minister said that she had a guardrail for the deficit. It would not go beyond $40 billion. If you go up to $40 billion, that means you've hit the guardrail. And if you go higher than $40 billion, you've gone through the guardrail. What's on the other side of a guardrail? A cliff.
Yeah.
Is this minister leading us off the cliff?
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Let's talk about the spending that our government is doing. Let's talk about what observers are observing. Tiff Macklem, I'm pretty sure he knows who that is, the Governor of the Bank of Canada, says we're no longer trying to get inflation down. Government spending is not pushing against getting inflation down. We have already brought it down. Let's talk about David Dodge, the former Bank of Canada Governor who was in place when that member was in Cabinet. He said because it was obsessively focused on reducing the federal deficit over fiscal years 2011 to 2016, the Harper government unnecessarily contributed to a slower rather than a more muted recovery. We're not going to follow that playbook because it didn't work.
And ask colleagues to please not take the floor so that we can hear the answer to the question clearly. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, in the spirit of nonpartisanship, we have put forward a motion inspired by the leader of the NDP.
That's right.
He has said that this Prime Minister is weak, is greedy, is selfish, and is beholden to corporate interests. He has pointed out that this Prime Minister has violated the rights of workers. So we took the NDP leader's words, we put it in a motion that includes non-confidence. Will the Prime Minister allow this NDP leader a free vote so that he can vote non-confidence for Canadians?
See, that is stretching the limits, of course, of question dealing with the administration of government, but I see that the Honourable Government House Leader is on her feet.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One thing we know, Mr. Speaker, is that the Leader of the Opposition certainly doesn't allow any free votes for his members of Parliament. And what we also know is that he doesn't allow them to speak for themselves. What we do know is that when they put forward, try to advocate for their communities, what does he say? No, don't do that, because I don't think it's politically expedient for me. So what he does do is muzzle his own MPs, doesn't allow them to have free vote, and keeps them from standing up for their communities. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Please. The Honourable Member from Calgary Forest Lawn.
This Liberal NDP government created a fall fiscal fiasco as they failed to table their fall economic statement. After 9 years of inflationary deficits, adding more debt than every government before them combined, they have a lot to hide. Even the Parliamentary budgeting officer said this feudal finance minister blew through her own fiscal guardrail of her $40 billion deficit. Why don't they just stop the economic arson, stop the tax hikes, stop the inflationary deficits, stop adding to the debt? and call a carbon tax election now.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Innovation.
Well, Mr. Speaker, we know that the only thing the Conservatives are serving up for Christmas dinner are stale slogans. They've been trying to change the channel. The Bank of Canada Governor said at a Senate committee recently, government spending is not pushing up or pushing against us getting inflation down. The Parliamentary Budget Officer also recently said the current fiscal policy in Canada is sustainable. He also said we could spend up to 1.5% more of GDP. What's appalling is to understand how the Conservative Party of Canada won't step up to support a tax break with all their obsession about tax cuts.
The Honourable Member for Calgary, Forest Lawn.
While the Liberals brag about turning temporary 2-month tax tricks like taking dimes off Doritos, common sense Conservatives will axe the tax for good because their carbon tax scam is driving more than 2 million Canadians into a food bank in a single month and 1 in 4 to skip meals. If they're so sure about quadrupling their carbon tax scam, why don't they just stop? Stop breaking the country further. Call a carbon tax election now so Canadians can choose between more tax tricks or a common sense Conservative government that will bring home lower prices and powerful paychecks.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives want to talk about tax tricks. What I think is interesting is tricking Canadians into thinking that they're actually serious about cutting taxes for Canadians when the first opportunity they get to stand up in this House and support Canadians who they know well have been struggling through an inflationary period. And they won't. They stand up against, they oppose the very tax cuts that they campaigned on. A GST holiday for Canadians on essentials over the next 2 months is a good thing. I don't know how they can deny the support that Canadians deserve.
The Honourable Member for Simcoe North.
Mr. Speaker, last year the Finance Minister said that the deficit would be less than $40.1 billion. And now Parliament's still waiting for the public accounts to confirm whether the minister kept that promise. Can the minister spare us the suspense and tell us what the deficit was for last year?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, our government has stuck to our fiscal guardrails, and that's exactly why inflation has come down for 11 months in a row, has been within the Bank of Canada's target range for 11 months in a row. We were the first in the G7 to cut interest rates, and we've had 4 consecutive rate cuts. And we're looking forward to this Wednesday with the Bank of Canada. We'll have another meeting and looking forward to their announcement. Thank you.
That's right.
Colleagues, especially the Honourable Member from Abbotsford, please do not speak unless recognized by the Speaker. The Honourable Member from Simcoe North.
Mr. Speaker, what is the point of making promises that you don't intend to try or even keep? In 2020, the Finance Minister said that when the need for stimulus was over, it would be withdrawn. They didn't withdraw it. Then it was that the debt to GDP ratio would continue going down, except 1 year later, it went up. And then she said the deficit would be less than $40.1 billion. And lo and behold, we find out she's broke that promise too. So when will someone at least admit that these folks are committing economic vandalism and tell us what the deficit is, or are they just worried that it's going to shred all the credibility that she has left?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Innovation.
Our government will stack up and compare our record to the Conservatives and run on that any day of the week and twice on Sundays.
Order. I'm going to ask the honourable members to please not take and have conversations over those, especially those who are using devices to be able to listen to the proceedings of the House. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary from the top, please.
From the top. Our government will stack up and run our record, our fiscal and economic record against the Conservatives any day of the week and twice on Sunday. And I'm happy.
Colleagues, the more time that the Speaker has to spend on his feet, the fewer questions we have to get through in question periods. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our government will run on our record on economic policy against the Conservatives any day of the week, and twice on Sundays. We have a AAA credit rating, the lowest deficit, the lowest net debt to GDP ratio. We have seen that the Stats Canada has revised the forecast for Canada for the last 3 years up, which is significant. And we're also rated by the IMF to have the strongest GDP growth in the G7. I think that economic record stands for itself, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Calgary, Rocky Ridge.
Mr. Speaker, the Finance Minister's failure to table a timely fall economic statement goes to the core incompetency of this government. Canadians need a government to axe the carbon tax, build more homes by exempting the GST from new home construction, and fix the budget by getting spending under control. And Canadians are tired of waiting. Can the Finance Minister confirm if she will keep her promise that the deficit will not exceed her $40 billion fiscal guardrail? Yes or no, please?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister for Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, it is great to learn today that our government will announce the fall economic statement. It will be tabled on December 16th, which is good news. And, you know, what's interesting is when the Conservatives say fix the budget, what they really mean to say, like Canadians should hear that as translated, means cut programs and services that Canadians rely on. Whether it's dental care, pharmacare, early childhood and education, any of the signature programs that have supported Canadians through this inflationary crisis, they're going to cut all of them.
Honourable Member for Calgary, Rocky Ridge.
Well, Mr. Speaker, it's nearly Christmas, and we're still waiting for the fall economic statement and for the public accounts, both of which should have been tabled in October. That's just basic management. Canadians need to know how much debt this government's piling on, and if this government can't even manage the basics, like giving Canadians the straight facts about the public's finances, will they call an immediate election so that Canadians can elect a government that will?
Hear, hear! Hear, hear!
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Innovation.
I've been here for 5 years, thank God for the people of Whitby. I have never seen the level of obstruction in this House that I've seen over the last 40-something days, where the Conservatives have continued to filibuster and block every aspect of parliamentary functioning and work, and they're standing up complaining that the fall economic statement is just a bit too late for them. Well, you have done it to yourselves.
I remind all members to making sure that they pass all comments through the chair. À l'ordre, s'il vous plaît. Order.
It's all your fault, right?
Don't make me laugh.
The Honourable Member for Bellechasse-Lévis. We need to stop these tax hikes and the skyrocketing debt and inflation, but that doesn't seem to matter to the Liberal bloc. But it's extremely important to the common sense Conservatives. We need to leave money in the pockets of Quebecers. That's our vision. We are wondering why the Bloc Québécois voted twice against our non-confidence motions and propped up this bad government that is hurting people every day. When will we have elections so that Quebecers can finally do something to choose a Conservative government and keep money in their pockets? The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our colleague talked about common sense. Well, what is total nonsense is that in her own riding, there are 100 affordable housing units that are currently being built on Léo Couture Boulevard. They are currently being built by the Lévis Municipal Housing Bureau, and Minister Drainville from the government of Quebec and other stakeholders, and they're very proud of what they're accomplishing. And yet she lets the Conservative leader pretend that these housing units don't exist, and he also seems to want to stop construction of them. The Honourable Member for Portneuf-Jacques-Cartier. Mr. Speaker, everyone knows that over the last 9 years, this Liberal government has plunged Canadians into debt. And on 2 occasions, unfortunately, the Bloc Québécois has propped this government up. Quebecers deserve much better. Once again, This minority government has lost control of public funds since, once again, it will be tabling the fall economic statement not long before the holidays. Is this the Christmas present that we're going to be getting? An extra deficit from this wasteful government?
Avant que je reconnaisse l'honorable ministre, juste inviter tous les députés.
I would just invite all members to not take the floor unless they've been recognized by the chair. The Honourable Minister of Innovation. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank my colleague for his question. I know that the holidays are coming up, and the Conservatives love hearing children's stories and slogans, but even the member for Port-Neuf-Jacques-Cartier, a person I respect, but he knows perfectly well that we've made record investments. In 2023, Canada was the third country on the list of the countries that received the most investment, and we are investing in Canadians, in industry and Canadian workers. Mr. Speaker, we should be celebrating the investment that is being made in Canada.